Okay, folks, we're going to get started here in just a second. If everyone could take their seats. Just a couple of people coming in here at the end. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cap Times 2015 Madison Mayoral debate. My name is Jason Joyce. I'm the news editor with the Cap Times. With me, of course, Mayor Paul Soglin and Alder Scott Resnick. First of all, big thanks to our friends here at the Central Library. We really wanted to have this debate in a centrally located, very cool room, and I think everyone can agree this is like one of the coolest rooms in Madison, so we really appreciate their help putting this together and with getting the room set up tonight. Just a couple of quick items before we get started. The Cap Times is producing a Madison Mayor's Race podcast. Some of you may have already heard that. We're putting out about one a week. There's not really any regular day to it. It's sort of as we can pull it together. But you can find those at thecaptimes.com. And you can also, and this is the coolest thing, you can subscribe on iTunes and also any of your other podcasting applications. Just search for Madison Mayor. That should be able to get you there on just about any platform. We'll also be posting video from tonight's debate at thecaptimes.com starting tomorrow with some installments throughout the end of the week. The Cap Times is thrilled to be the media partner of the 2015 Wisconsin Film Festival. That's sort of a news scoop there. You can tell all your friends you heard it here tonight first. The first thing to happen will be a week from Wednesday, March 11th, 7 to 9 p.m. at Sundance Cinemas. The first Look at the Fest event is taking place, and the Cap Times is hosting that. Tickets are $35 in advance, $40 at the door, and they come with this very important opportunity to order some Film Fest tickets early. Find out more about that event at wifilmfest.org. The Cap Times is getting into events in a big way. We're planning many more for the rest of the year, and the best way to learn about that is to sign up for our email list. There's a clipboard right out in the hallway. We promise not to spam you. We'll just send emails about relevant events, and we hope you can join us for those. Of course, you can always like us on Facebook. That's a good place to find out about these things, and follow us on Twitter at Cap Times. Tonight's debate format will be relatively simple and straightforward. We have several questions for the candidates, many of which have come from our readers, really a great amount of help from our readers. We encourage you to use the cards that are on your seats. If you have questions of your own, we'll be collecting those right after the opening remarks, so get to work early on those. You can also use the hashtag Madison Mayor if you're tweeting, and we'll be following that throughout tonight as well. After each candidate gives his opening remarks, we'll move on to questions. Each will be given 4 minutes to answer with 1 minute for rebuttals. We gave each candidate the opportunity to ask a question of his opponent. Mayor Soglin declined that offer, but Alder Resnick wrote a question, and we'll deal with that right before closing remarks. There will be at least 5 more forums involving the two candidates between tonight and the April 7th election, and no doubt numerous opportunities to hear from both between now and then. We urge you to take every opportunity that you can, and we're going to ask the two candidates to be as specific as possible with their answers tonight. One final note to the audience, please hold your applause until the end of the event and allow the candidates to deliver their responses without interruption or disruption. Without further ado, Mayor Soglin won the coin toss, so he will deliver his opening remarks first.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm the guy, if you can't tell the difference between us, who is identified as old, tired, gray, and bland. Well, I'm going to show you old, tired, gray, and bland, all right? And I'm not going to cover anything I did in the past. State Street Mall, Capitol Concourse, Monona Terrace, thousands of units of public and affordable housing. I'm not going to discuss some of the major events that have taken place in the city in the last 4 years, like getting Cap East District started, finishing off the 700-800 blocks, or dealing with the incredible low, in fact we were the worst city in the country, housing vacancy rate, and adding close to 5,000 new units that have either been constructed or are under construction now. But instead I want to focus on what we've accomplished, because old, gray, bland, and tired. It's done a lot. We participated with the county, and we worked together, and now we've got the Rethke project for 110 new units out on East Washington, which is going to house some of the worst cases of chronic homelessness in our community. We've launched a $25 million 5-year program over the next 5 years to create 1,000 units, utilizing unused, previously weeded tax credits and the new opportunities in TIP, which, if we don't get any significant increase in the number of homeless in the community, should eliminate homelessness within the period of this construction. We reestablished the neighborhood resource teams, and I'll get to in a moment to some of the things that they've accomplished. We've joined in 3 national efforts, which has kept us in the forefront with the group of My Brother's Keeper, the President's Initiative, Cities United, and the Racial and Equity Social Justice Consortium, which is working with cities like Portland, New Orleans, Seattle, the Twin Cities, on the challenges of making sure that young African American and Latino men are integrated economically and educationally into our society. We've got an award-winning summer youth program that we jump-started last year and suddenly has caught on within the community, creating another 650 jobs in the next 3 years because of a generous donation from the Rennebaum Foundation. And speaking of that, through my efforts at working with the private sector, we've got a commitment of $1 million in cash to create 200 jobs for adults in the next coming years. We just finished off a disparity study, which is in the news. We collaborated with the school district on out-of-school time, dealing with those valuable hours when kids are either after school, on the weekends, or during vacations, not doing enough, which furthers their academic achievement. What else have we done? Well, one of the major things we've done is we've got some efforts to improve the housing stock in the city. We kept pressure on the Woodlands, forced its sale, and now seen substantial improvements there. We've increased the library outreach. We've created an NRT budget to fund community engagement activities in focused neighborhoods. We spurred the purchase and development of a community center in the Hammerly-Teresa Terrace area. We expanded the Meadowwood Center. We made a major addition to the Meadowwood Library, and now we've got Griff's going, where we're going to create up an employment center for young adults. We've created an outreach worker for kids at Brentwood. We've gone further than that. We've worked in the Madison. Time's up. I got a lot more. Thank you.
Alder Resnick.
Today, Madison is missing opportunities. We don't live up to our potential. I take a look at cities across the country and what they're doing to be cutting edge. I take a look at Burlington, Vermont, which is doing more in sustainable energy than communities around the country. I take a look at New Orleans, which isn't planning of ending veterans' homelessness, they've actually ended veterans' homelessness. I take a look at Virginia Beach when it comes to childcare, affordable housing, in Oakland, in Seattle, when it comes to what they're doing with their library systems, Miami, which when the state said no to rail, they were able to find a pathway forward. And I look to see where the city of Madison is today. I take a look at the 41% increased homelessness population in the city of Madison from 4 years ago. I take a look at the 14 individuals who are sleeping outside of City Hall, their possessions stacking up, and I find that absolutely unacceptable. Yes, housing first is the right strategy, but the approach that the mayor's putting forward is going to take years before we see incremental improvements. We need a new men's emergency shelter. Not today, we needed it today, but we're not going to see it. We need a one-stop shop to corral all services in a central location here to our downtown. We need to take a holistic approach that includes drug counseling, healthcare, job creation, and therapy. I take a look at what the issues the city of Madison is plagued with racial disparities in our community. And these are conversations that we've had in the 1980s, the 1990s, in 2002, in 2009, 2013, and we're still having them once again today. And what I did was I started to listen to the faith-based leaders who didn't feel like they had a voice in this conversation. And they identified 4 areas for us to focus in. 1, they said we need to do something about childcare and 24-hour childcare. And what that means is seed resources to make sure that localized daycares can open up throughout our city and that we have more scholarships available for students who simply need childcare. We take a look at it and we know what the research shows. If students are entering the Madison School District on equal footing, they have a better chance for success. 2, it's about transportation. We take a look at where the transportation has gone in the city of Madison, and we no longer are a top 10 bike-friendly community, but what this is about is how we connect the downtown to the rest of our city, to make sure that we fully fund programs and jobs for transportation, to make sure that we have strong public transportation networks. It means we have a jobs program that follows Portland, which says 3 words: innovate, include, and invest, where we ensure that equity isn't a buzzword, and we talk about jobs that we can create and economic development that supports everyone in the city of Madison. But we can't do this if we have a polarizing city government. When our county executive can't work with the city council, when the county executive can't work with the mayor, when the mayor's office can't work with our city council, when we're fighting our partners, this is what collaboration is about. And if we don't have it, it holds the city of Madison back from what our true potential can be. This is why I'm running for mayor.
Okay, before we move into questions, a couple of people are standing. There are seats available over here, so if you want to take a stroll over right now, you won't be interrupting anybody. Great, thanks.
How do we hand in our questions?
Someone will collect them here in a little bit. Thanks. First question, and this will go to Alder Resnick first. After 4 shootings on the west side this weekend, Madison Police Chief Mike Koval said this morning, we've got to get a grip on this. We've got plenty of homegrown gang issues right here, right in Camelot. Southwest Madison residents are growing increasingly frustrated at what they see as a quickly escalating crime and violence problem. When soliciting questions for this event, we received more on this issue than any other topic. Knowing that, what is the strategy you would pursue as mayor to decrease the threat of gun and gang violence in Madison's neighborhoods? Please be specific.
So this is a conversation, it's not the first time the police chief has raised this as a major issue. And when the mayor criticized the city council for moving forward on a west side police station, these were the issues that the police chief was talking about. It means that we create a task force with our partners in place. The county, the sheriff's department, our school system, our philanthropic partners, our nonprofit community leaders, and have a task force to start addressing the issues of gang violence immediately within Madison. We need to ensure that students have a place of hope, and gang members can find safe havens, where if they want to break out of a different path, that will put forward the resources in finding an individual a job, or will find someone housing if they are in a gang and looking for a way forward. We also need to ensure that when we're talking about reincarceration rates and gang members that are entering our community, that we can provide them with the resources so they don't have to go back into the cyclical issues of having gang violence. What we do is we provide individuals housing and make sure that they have support when someone's released from prison, to make sure that they have a place to go that isn't a former gang, and we do this through community effort. This is going to be a problem that the city of Madison is going to continue to face if we're not working together.
A Midtown police station is not going to solve the problem. The Midtown police station was put in the budget ahead of the request of the police chief because a couple of alders were confused because their aldermanic district was served by multiple stations. by South and Central, by West and South. Let's get straight about what we've done and what we're doing. The additional station is not going to add more officers on the street. The additional station is not going to do anything in terms of restorative justice. It will be more convenient, but right now we've got more important priorities than convenience. 4 years ago, I was the only candidate that you're looking at now who said we have problems dealing with poverty and social justice. My critics said I didn't know what I was talking about. But we went to work on the initiatives, many of which you heard me reiterate in the introduction. We restored the neighborhood resource teams. We began, and let me just go through the list because it's so extensive I can't remember it all. We've got a Madison Police Department card check so that we can have greater contact with young people so that they don't get in trouble and get into the criminal justice system because of equipment problems with their cars. We've got a reentry program. Well, by the way, speaking of the faith-based community, it's with Madison Urban Ministry. It was a program in 2013 and 2014 that works on community violence. We've got another program with Mom dealing with bakeries to get people into the workforce. We've got the Jesse Crawford Recovery Center for prisoner reentry. We are doing that. We've partnered with Nehemiah on breaking the school-to-prison pipeline for middle school students. We're working with Centro Hispano. But the key is this. The key is working to break that cycle of poverty, institutionalization. Let me ask you this. Where are the young people arrested in our community? They're not arrested in their neighborhoods. They're arrested in 12 critical spots in this city. Our 4 high schools, 4 bus transfer points, and 4 big box discount stores. That's where they're arrested. Why do they get in trouble in those places? Well, the school district is now working to see what kind of intervention we can have within the district to stop these kids from going on that pipeline from school to prison. Our police officers are engaged in the South District in a pure court so we can take these kids and not have them going into the criminal justice system, but divert them from it and focus on their activities, their health, and their academics. It was critical that we get the summer youth job program started. There was 25 kids involved. And then last year, we created 25 positions alone within the city, which Alderman Resnick mocked. But we got another 125 working with the Boys and Girls Club and working with the Urban League. And then that inspired exactly as it was designed for the creation, as I mentioned earlier, of the 650 jobs. That's how we're going to do it.
Alder Resnick, you have a minute.
We're not doing enough. If each one of these programs were having success, we would be seeing incremental improvements. Now, we talk about what we can be doing because right now we have a serious issue. And we can go about and placing blame, we can talk about different issues, but what we need to do is look at what we can do in the immediate. Whether it's gun buyback programs, whether it's implementing programs we've done in the past, because we need to have an additional focus. We talk about job programs, but let's make sure that we have the accountability to show that these are the programs that are actually curbing the youth violence that we're seeing right now.
Mayor Seidlin, you have a minute.
We've got preliminary data on some of these areas. We've already seen, and by the way, so we all are working from the same place. The Race to Equity study That's based on 2011 data. It's data that's 4 years old. The latest data we have is 2013, which was made available at the end of 2014. In the areas of household income, in the areas of children living in poverty, and in the areas of unemployment, we have closed on all three of those areas. In terms of the data on arrests, it's too early to tell, but I'm confident that we are on the right track, especially since you've got a mayor who recognized this problem and did something about it.
Okay, this question will start with you, Mayor Soglin. The 12% turnout for the primary election indicates diminished engagement with local government in a city that is, by all accounts, overly knowledgeable about politics and extremely active. How much blame do the candidates deserve for such a low turnout? And how much of a priority will community engagement be for your administration?
Hey, I got 53% of the votes. Don't look at me. Community engagement has been the hallmark of my administrations for years. For those of you who are old enough to go back to the 1970s, and I see more than one of you in the room, you know that we started out at that time fully committed to strengthening neighborhoods. We are nationally recognized as having one of the strongest neighborhood organization systems in the United States. In addition, and let me use this as a marketing opportunity in case I get reelected, I would particularly hope that all of you would consider, not all of you, I'll explain that in a second, consider serving on a city committee or board. If you're from the 2nd District and 6th District, there's too many of you. Let's be fair and let's have room for other people. But citywide, I really hope we can get more diversity, we can get geographic, gender, race, ethnic background, because that's the hallmark of city government. The neighborhoods of this community have played an important and vibrant role, but I want to emphasize one thing. We cannot lead to balkanization of the city. We have to, at times, recognize the overwhelming need to have a strong city for all of us in developing transportation, housing policy, child care, health policies, and particularly housing. Thank you.
It's about civic participation. And it's really about how we can use new tools to modernize that entire process. Now, one of the things that both the mayor and I support was Idea Scale. And what Idea Scale was to collect the ideas for the City of Madison budget, so if anybody here has an idea, something that the city might be missing, submit those ideas to City Hall online. You know, we look at what time our meetings take place, and it's really difficult for many residents to show up to City Hall to be able to testify, to sometimes wait hours on end to have your voices heard. We see if that happens at the state capitol, there's a time limit on it. But here in the city of Madison, it's every single alder and the mayor's priority to make sure that every person's voice is represented in our democracy. Now, I think that we can take new steps to make sure that it's a transparent process, that you know if we're having a city meeting, what time is that meeting at, where is it, and what is the subject matter that's going to be. And we actually see, in this time with so much modern technology, we're taking a step back from those very core elements that make communication and processes less efficient. We're seeing times where we're not communicating well enough to our residents on the very issues and matters at hand, and there's room for improvement.
Mayor Soglin, you have a minute if you'd like.
I want to use this final minute to mention the neighborhood resource teams, but also the challenges we have, whether it's evening meetings like this or it's using technology. There are two critical elements that we must have for citizen participation and meaningful engagement. They are access and trust. And we can't assume that because any one of us can go to an evening meeting or have access to a computer, that everyone does. It's critical that we take this responsibility to neighborhoods. And one of the really satisfying things that I've seen in the last 4 years is, for example, the beginning of a strong neighborhood group at Worthington. The fact that in Meadowwood we're getting tremendous engagement, followed in the Brentwood area by the homeowning community and the renting community. This is the basis for building neighborhoods that work.
Moving on. This one is for Alder Resnick first. We have heard about the racial disparities and opportunity gaps in our community for years now, with a dramatic increase in those discussions over the last year and a half. Let's take a look at just one of those factors, which has a significant impact on all the others: social separation. How much energy would you dedicate to desegregating Madison socially, and what strategies would you pursue as mayor?
Talk about a complex question right there. And a question that's not going to be answered in a 3-minute time period or just amongst the individuals in this room. Because I look across this room and I still see a majority, predominantly Caucasian room. I see a room that still cares quite a bit about these issues, why it's on the forefront of our radar screen, but we need to do so much more. So when I look at what I've done, what I did as I read Justified Anger is I reached out to Reverend Alex G., went to Nehemiah, and talked about the issues that he was facing right there in his own community. I said, what is it that the city or myself as a business leader can do right now to have systematic improvements? What we did was a couple different things. One, at the Urban League, we held a jobs program where we ended up inviting CEOs from companies throughout Madison, technology companies, down to the Urban League for the first time. Many members had never been to South Madison before. And for the first time during that visit, they learned some of the true treasures of South Madison. We started to talk about what were the next major factors that members of that community were looking for. And it was access to new technology companies. It was how to use different forms of social media. We ended up having these conversations and ideas not led by someone from City Hall, but residents of the actual community. Among members of the tech companies, we created a job internship program that followed. 30 Jobs, a program sponsored by the YWCA that I'm still so proud of. We ensured that every single student who signed up for the program ended up having training from a key member of the community in programming and ensured an internship for every single student. But we have major issues when we have silos in our community. When we're not traveling back and forth, this is where we see the segregation in our community, and it's something that we all as Madisonians need to work to break down.
How many people in this room in the last year or two have been to Dane dances? Now there is an example, what I think is the best example of one of the most diverse, integrated, race, ethnic, income events in our city. That should be the hallmark. That should be the standard for all of our activity. What it means, it makes some people uncomfortable, that when I get in trouble, I'm going to perhaps get in trouble a lot, but when I get in trouble for being critical of Overture, one of the things I was critical of was the lack of diversity and that putting all that money into that facility did not reflect the complexion of this community. Overture's made tremendous improvements in the last couple of years. But there's other things that a mayor can do. Coincidentally, I'm meeting with Reverend G tomorrow morning. Michael Johnson from the Boys and Girls Club is here. We meet regularly, going over a number of issues. But I think they would agree with me that for the mayor, there's more to it than that. And you can ask Sarah about nights that I get out in the car by myself and drive to Vera Court, to Penn Park, to Meadowwood, other neighborhoods in the city. There's times when we're out together, and I'll say to Sarah, do you mind if we take a detour? And we go, and we drop in on neighborhoods, unannounced, no press, no escorts, no one to make introductions. That's a standard that a mayor can set. But it's so important that we create those two elements I said before, access and trust. It means engagement. This is why it's so important that we start with the schools. You go to a school event with the parents, and you look at the complexion of the kids, and then the parents, and it doesn't match. There's something wrong with this picture. That's why I'm so adamant in working with school officials that more has to be done in terms of parental engagement. That's why when we hold city conferences, I proposed that we have childcare and transportation available for those who've got challenges in having someone watch their kids without the financial resources to pay for a sitter. These are the critical things that a mayor can do. And that's why so many of these elements that I started the introduction with are critical. Because, as you know, how many here remember Harambe? Half a dozen people. That was a mechanism we set up on the south side, a system that over an 8-year period of time took Madison and Dane County from what was then a standard infant mortality rate for African Americans, for African American infants, and dropped it so that actually for 1 year it was lower than it was for whites here in Madison and Dane County. And then people said, well, we've got victory, and they dissolved Harambe. That's why I had a meeting earlier today. It's a part of a series with someone who's committed to bringing Harambe back because of the engagement that it creates.
Alder Resnick, you have a minute?
You know, I'll add on one point that the mayor made, and it was about Dane dances. Because there was a particular evening this summer where Overture had a performance live on King Street was occurring. I believe it was with Ziggy Marley, and you had Dane dances. And for one of the rare nights in Madison's downtown, you would see such a wide range, not just of race, but of age, of people enjoying our city. It was such a beautiful night. That's what we need to be striving for. Culture and arts are what brings that force together. We need to be setting that bar of excellence, not just on one night during the year, but throughout 365 days in the city of Madison.
Mayor Soglin?
I'm done.
Fabulous. This one's for you, Mayor Soglin. Both yourself and Alder Resnick agree that Madison should establish municipal broadband internet access, but differ on how to arrive there. Given the Federal Communications Commission's decision to preempt state barriers to community broadband in Tennessee and North Carolina last week, and Wisconsin's still existing barriers, what do you see as both the immediate and also the long-term paths forward for municipal broadband in Madison?
Believe it or not, I don't know the answer to that question. But let me share with you my thoughts and how we go about together finding the answer. First, let's understand the federal FCC decision. One, it was the best we could ask for, because what it said in those two instances is that these restrictive state laws, which are designed to protect the monopolies that presently provide us with internet service, can be challenged, and the FCC will allow municipalities to go forward. Good news. Bad news, it's going to be appealed and it's going to be in the courts. Another challenge for us. What are we going to do to establish our, shall we say, perimeter and find a commercial partner so that we can go about creating broadband internet connectivity for two very important groups and all the rest of us in between. First are the children and households who are on the other side of the digital divide and don't have access. And the other are those companies that vitally need high speed for the operation of their businesses. So, and like I said, for the vast majority of the rest of us, we're somewhere in between. Well, interesting question, because I met with the city's IT director today and said to him, would you take this issue to the broadband telecommunications committee? Would you pose to them the very question, really, that this author has put forth to us of this question? Do we go and continue for one small $150,000 commitment to one area? Do we go forward with the investment in a study based on continuing that kind of line? Or do we come in and find ourselves a private partner who will want to take on the responsibility of providing the best internet service possible to our community? This will go forward to the committee in about 2 weeks. I await their recommendations. We've got some very knowledgeable people, and we've got a great challenge and a great opportunity before us. But I do want to mention that I was one of three mayors, along with Mayor Lee of San Francisco, who led the way getting the U.S. Conference of Mayors to go forward full speed on both the question of net neutrality, which is another victory we had with the FCC last week. So for those of you who are doing downloading, you're not going to have to pay more money for popular content. And on this question of trying to get preemption of these very restrictive state laws. It's not going to be easy, it's not going to be quick, but if you look at the speeds in Chattanooga, if you look at the speeds in Paris, if you look at the speeds in Seoul, South Korea, they are so far ahead of us. And if we're going to have a robust economy based on technology, more companies gravitating to us because of the existence of Epic, we're going to have to take on this challenge. My guess is that there may be some companies out there that want to join with a municipality like Madison because we're a vibrant community that's growing, and that will help us solve the problem.
So the question that the mayor's been asked today, we've been talking about for the last 2 years. And the way I went about this, because although I started a tech company, although I understand the internet, I understand dark fiber, the way I went about it was I put together the smartest individuals that I could find from the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and those from the university, and we started reviewing the options for what the city of Madison could do today. We talked about fiber to the home. Fiber to the home is what's sitting in Chattanooga that was funded by federal resources, and the dollar point came back to about $120 million, and you said, all right, we can't afford fiber to the home. What's the next best option? And what we started is talking about what was an LTE 4G network. So if you think about the internet that goes to your phones, We felt that that was an efficient and cost-effective way to get internet into the hands of individuals who are on free and reduced lunch and other residents on limited incomes on a network that makes sense. Because for us, it was maintaining internet access for everyone and crossing the digital divide. We've been working on this issue for well over now 18 months. We've put together budget amendments. We've discussed this at length. So I'm glad the question comes back to us at the Digital Technology Committee so we can reaffirm our statements that this is a good pathway forward. Now, when it comes to businesses, now we have what's called the Muffin Loop. It's the network of fiber that sits under our streets. It was a major investment made in our community, and that's the high-speed internet that we're really excited about. But there are things we could do right now. We have exclusive agreements that only a select few companies can actually tap into the Muffin network. You want to see more fiber in the communities and more high-speed access, let more people tap into fiber. Because we don't need to look outside of our city for these great internet utility providers. They're right here. They want to be part of the conversation, and they are right now. So I'm excited to move forward with the initiatives that I've been working on now for many years, the issue that I'm very passionate about, and I'm excited that the mayor and I agree that it should be a priority for the city of Madison.
Mayor Seidlin, 1 minute.
Well, we do have some major disagreements. First, I don't know who your expert is and your smartest is, but I have for years relied on Barry Orton at the UW, who's been one of the nationally known consultants on the subject. And Barry and I are in agreement on a couple of things. One, you're basing part of your structure of what you want to do on Sun Prairie does not work for Madison. It's different laws, it's different structure. They already have their own municipal utility. We don't have it. So let's get straight about that. Secondly, as I've been saying all along for the last 3 months, let's look and see what the FCC has done. You have dismissed that as being irrelevant, which I never could figure out. Muffin is a great backbone, and I am very proud to have been instrumental in working on that and making sure it gets connected to our schools, to our community centers, but it is going to take a public-private partnership.
Alder Resnick, minute.
What the mayor's talking about in front of the FCC is going to be debated in courts for the next few years. We have the resources right now. The individuals that we brought together was individuals from SuperNet, who are the ones who actually lay our fiber lines to our schools and to our neighborhood centers. The private partners we brought together were 5-9s. They're the ones who connect our entire downtown. I have brought together individuals as far as the White House CTO to talk about what other communities are doing and where we can be to be on the cutting edge of internet access with the resources that were handed to us. The city of Madison has made failed attempts in the past with Mad City Broadband and other initiatives. There are areas that we could see true improvement right now with the resources we have. So let's, instead of fighting about this, bring our experts together, talk about this for the best outcome for the city of Madison.
Okay, this question, we'll start with you, Alder Resnick. 3 recent high-profile parks projects have happened within blocks of each other on Madison's Near East Side. I'm talking about Central Park, the Tenney Park Shelter, and improvements to Breeze Stevens Field, which I believe just concluded recently if they're not still underway. Which area of the city is up next for a significant parks project? Do you have a timetable in mind? And as mayor, how will you make that a reality?
That's a great question. So when we look at first what's going on in the park areas that we're talking about right there, and the creation of Central Park has been a great resource to our community. However, there are many neighborhood stresses that Central Park has created. You have homeowners that have lived in their neighborhood for 15 to 20 years and not expected to move next to a concert arena. that it feels like every single night you have noise, you have complaints, and while one or two festivals are phenomenal, when you start having it on a regular basis, there's not a whole lot of predictability there. And you have a number of residents that are feeling the stresses of those park projects. We need to ensure that we've paid off much of the debt of those city park projects. Where I see the next area of opportunity is what's the future of Olin Park. I see community leaders who are talking about Olin as a potential gateway to our community, as we see what's the exciting things that are going on with Alliant Energy Center, where we see what it could be to connect Olin to our downtown and the connections throughout our isthmus. I'm very excited what could be the future of Olin Park. I'm excited that the City Council passed, under the Mayor's support, new projects and planning for that area of the city. However, it's going to take additional community engagement. It's going to take a lot of participation, because the same way that it took quite a bit of time to plan out for Central Park, we still need to do that once again over in Olin.
Well, I doubt that any neighborhood of the city is going to see anything in the near future as massive as what happened in Central Park. We were fortunate to get an earmarked federal funds for that, and given the present condition of the Congress, which can't seem to keep open various federal agencies, I don't see it happening in the near future. But coming back down to earth, I also want to remind you, we did some costly improvements at one West Side and one East Side Park this last year, and that was the splash pads we put in at Rindall and at Elfer. Probably the most immediate need on a community basis is Penn Park. The park shelter at Penn Park is inadequate. It resembles a Soviet-style bunker and does not provide adequate services for people who heavily use this neighborhood park. Alderman Resnick mentioned Olin Turtle, and the planning has to start here, but we are dependent upon the county. And let me just explain. So we're all on the same page. Please recall that the Alliant Energy Center is one understudy now by the county, because it's what's considered 4 generations old for those kinds of facilities. And keep in mind, it's not in the city of Madison. It's in the town of Madison and not scheduled to come into the city until the year 2023, if I remember correctly. Though many of us are working diligently trying to persuade town officials to advance that date, not so much for the Alliant Energy Center, but for the well-being of having a coherent social and economic plan for the South Side. We can have some ideas, we can work on how to take this great lakeshore property and develop it for greater recreational use, but it's going to be very hard to do so long as we're waiting to see what the county does with the Alliant Energy Center. So I would suggest, yes, we go along with the planning process, but let's not over-anticipate what will happen. On another front, we've got some issues at Warner Park. There's neighborhood groups. You almost think that Warner was a downtown neighborhood. There's one faction, Wild Warner, that wants nothing done there. There's another group that wants to put a swimming pool in. There's another group who wants to keep it relatively stable as it is, but maybe have a youth-oriented center at the south end of the park. All I can say is stay tuned, but that is one of the areas of focus, particularly because it is surrounded by so many critical neighborhoods like Brentwood, Vera Court, Packers Northport, Kennedy Heights, and the Woodlands.
Alder Resnick?
I would only add here, this is why collaboration is so important. when we talk about the future planning of many of these parcels, we can start today if we're really working on collaborative energy, if we're treating everybody with respect, if we're having civil conversations going back and forth between the City of Madison and the county executive on these issues of things like Alliant Energy. You take a look at what we could have in the conversations with the town of Madison. These conversations don't happen overnight, but they only happen when you have someone who's truly committed to collaboration, listening, and treating everybody with respect.
Mayor Sagla.
Excuse me, Alderman Resnick, if you're going to lead the city, you've got to know what happened and what is happening. The City of Madison worked very collaboratively with the county, and we not only provided cash, which nobody else did, no other municipality, particularly the town of Madison where the facility is located, but we provided 2 staff people to staff their committee. Then what happened is the county board and the county executive got into a fight. They're the ones who are quarreling. And then when the county board prevailed in the debate, the county executive pulled everything off the table and took his marbles and went home. Now, I'm not getting into that battle. You can. But whenever they get their house in order, we're available.
Okay, we've got some cards from the audience. Thank you very much to everyone who's filled out these cards. We have time for a few questions from the audience. In particular, we got a number of cards about transit. So I'm going to attempt to combine 2 questions here, and we'll see how it goes. This question.
Your volume down. You're kind of booming.
Okay, I have a tendency to do that. Thanks. Thank you. One card reads the following, and this is probably at least a perception of many people who take the bus. The Transit and Parking Commission and Madison Metro are eliminating bus stops and routes throughout Madison so as to implement bus rapid transit light. What is your position on this? And please explain how you plan to improve rapid transit during your term. We'll start with you, Mayor Sagla.
Okay, let me point out that the Madison Metro system is just incredibly dear to my heart. I led the fight as a member of the council for the city to acquire the bus company over the serious protestations of Mayor Bill Dyke. As mayor in the 1970s, I saw the major commitment of capital investment in the system and record ridership levels. Unfortunately, during the period I left office, they declined, but they did start up again when I returned in 1989 through the late 90s. And I'm very proud to be mayor today when last year we set new ridership levels, finally exceeding the ones when I left office in 1979. Like many of you, I'm frustrated that we cannot get rail in Madison, Wisconsin. But given that we don't have the density, we don't have the capital resources, here is what we've been doing in our plan. I don't know about this BRT light. We are going for bus rapid transit. Something that emulates rail. It's going to have stations and platforms. You'll enter the buses. You will not be paying fares because hopefully you've honestly paid for it before you enter, though occasionally there'll be random checks to make sure that the patrons have paid. But also, one of the things that's critical to making it work is to get the vehicles from the edge of the city into the downtown as rapidly as possible. And that means it can't stop at every block. And so we're looking at alternatives where the buses will stop every other block. It does mean some people have to walk one more block to get to a stop, but it'll tremendously increase the efficiency, tremendously increase the capacity, and as they've done in Cleveland and in Eugene, Oregon, with great success, demonstrate the expanse of the system into neighboring communities, significantly reducing the demands placed on the community for the automobile, which is passing through. I want to also mention that just this past past month, I had a meeting with Robin Voss. As you all know, Robin Voss is the Assembly Speaker, has made it very clear in the past how adamantly opposed he is to rapid bus, to any kind of regional transit authority. I went into the meeting with him. It was very cordial. One person who attended the meeting came out with me and said, "You're probably the first person to ever discuss the regional transit authority with him who didn't get his head chewed off." Just call me Mr. Congeniality. But I explained to him the economics and the environmental benefits. I explained to him that I was willing to take the responsibility of making the argument for a half-a-cent sales tax to pay for it. And I agreed with him that one of the flaws in the previous reiteration of regional transit was something that he and I had in common, which is elected officials have to sit on the board. If there is going to be tax money raised, and if there is going to be tax money spent, there has to be people who are accountable to the public. It can't be individuals, as well-meaning as they may be, as private citizens. Thank you.
So my wife and I are both a one-car family. Actually, only since this campaign I've been stuck with 2 cars now, as I'm trying to get it around through the entire city. And the reality is, when you're actually using other modes of transportation, when you're actually someone who uses the bus, who uses our bike paths, that you rely on those forms of transportation to get around the city, you see exactly the imperfections of our system. A lot of it has to do with timing. And this is the struggle of, as we remove bus stops, and to still try to ensure that there's predictability in the system, we're going to have a struggle as we pick up bus stops. But the true matter is, there are so many areas of efficiency that we could still see within the system. When we look at what a real-time kiosk does to riding the bus, where one thing that's the hardest part about riding the bus is the fear that you may have missed the bus. And that's something that I still, if there isn't a real-time bus terminal, I don't ride that bus line because of that fear. There are so many areas that other metropolitan areas have done with making it easier to pay fares, easier to onboard and offboard. But the reality is that the metro system is still the main mode of transportation for many individuals. So it is correct. It's figuring out how to pay for bus rapid transit. If we can see progress in a half-cent sales tax, that's great. I don't know why we didn't do that 4 years ago. But it's a step in the right direction. The future of Madison, if we're going to see the growth and the density that we want, we're going to have strong multimodal forms of transportation, and metro system is one of those forms.
Mayor Soglin?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great. Keeping it moving along here. We'll start out with Alder Resnick on this one, but it's sort of a question addressed to both of you. Mayor Soglin, your critics throughout the mayoral campaign have charged that you are hard to work with and don't have a good relationship with the city council. Alder Resnick, your critics have charged that you might be elevating style over substance, and city residents don't really care whether the mayor and alders like each other as long as important work gets done. How do you define your leadership style, and what specifically are your top priorities when it comes to the working relationship between the mayor's office and the city council?
So I was elected to leadership of the Madison City Council. And the reality is, it doesn't matter if the mayor can work along with the council. What matters is if we're moving forward and making progress as a community. It's more than just style that we're struggling with. It's the fact that our lack of collaboration holds us back. It holds us back in so many decisions that we're making when there's uncertainty, when council members don't know what's on the forefront, when we don't know what days of the week it's appropriate to contact the mayor, when the mayor isn't regularly available to communicate with council members. Now, the mayor can deny this all he wants, but as a member of leadership, I had my colleagues regularly coming to me with their struggles with the mayor's office. It's why that we saw 7 council members and 7 members of my colleagues who've decided to endorse me in this election. What we see is, what we need to work together on is to make sure that at any point that we can ensure that we're having collaboration to be able to get to the ends that make Madison a great place.
Okay. First, let's not run from our success. In the last year or two, 2 major companies that make evaluations of cities said that we were the best city to live in the United States. Within a week, we were declared to be one of the 5 best cities for young entrepreneurs, and, this one I'm not sure about, the best place for retirement in the United States. Now, this is based on more than weather. It's based on metrics that deal with quality of life, livability, walkability, access to health. Now, it is true, and I was the one saying it in 2011, we had to have a great city for everyone. And I'm not going to rest until these standards are achievable by every family in our community. But I want to go back to 2011 and have us all recall Act 10 and what happened to the city of Madison and city employees in the following year. It became very clear that we had a new serious financial crisis on top of the one that had been created, which was the primary reason I ran. Remember, I said I wanted to fix the city's finances and then deal with the issues of poverty and equity. So I came into office and I was determined to make a difference. If we were going to get to these critical issues of poverty and equity, if we were going to preserve a AAA bond rating, there had to be changes. And you'll recall Alderman Verveer, the longest serving member on city council, said the city council never gave the mayor a chance. He was never given a honeymoon. But I went forward on a commitment that I made to you. And I said, if there's a report in the city's plan department that says we don't need $16.7 million for the Edgewater TIF, we only need $3.3 million. I said, we are only going to give them $3.3 million. Those are your millions of dollars. When they disappear, you lose the capacity to use that money for something else. When city employees saw their wages and their real income changed, I said, everyone has to make a sacrifice. We renegotiated city contracts with the bargaining units. And yes, I was not prepared to give Overture everything that had been promised. And then, as recently as this last year, when the city council raised revenues higher than I thought they should have been, by well over $500,000, I said, no, it's not right that the city council votes not one 25% increase this year, but two 25% increases in their salaries for 50%, and then turns around and turns down a 0.5% for city employees, 50%, a 0.5%, turns down a 0.5% for city employees who still aren't whole from 2011.
Alder Resnick, you have a minute?
When the mayor came back to the city council and members of leadership asking for his own raise, asking for a future mayor's salary to go up, members of the city council listened to the arguments and said yes. We understand the position that the mayor's making. It was a Board of Estimates meeting, and we said it was appropriate. Alders were making $6,800 to be a city council member, to put their time and energy on the line to sit through hundreds of hours of meetings each year and serve the city of Madison. And we voted to provide an increase over time, or we voted to provide an increase. There are many issues that impact the city of Madison budget. We make these very polarizing conversations. Thank you.
Mayor Soglin?
Let's just explain what the mayoral raise is. The mayor's salary raise is based on what the rest of the city employees get. City employees get a 0.5%, the mayor gets a 0.5%. What had happened was that the mayor's raise bumped up every 4 years, which created a significant increase in the mayoral office salary, budget, because of that bump. What we did is we went back to the original system that had been in place for decades, which was the mayoral salary went up annually rather than every 4 years, that 0.5%, that 1%. But it didn't go up 25 or 50% in 1 year.
Mayor Soglin, this question is for you first. In a Cap Times essay over the summer, Alderman Lucas Daly argued for a full-time city council, saying that serving on the council is a full-time job with an $8,000 salary. In theory, he wrote, anyone can run for council, but in practice, only those with financial means and highly flexible jobs can serve. Is it an unrealistic goal to expect that the makeup of the city council reflects the makeup of the city, and what needs to be done to accomplish that?
I want to go back to the salary increase for starters, because there's an important point here. I have never seen any salary increase like that come in a legislative body without it first going to a public citizen group to make recommendations. That's where any significant change, whether it's structure of salary or structure of the council, ought to come from. This is not a decision to be made by the mayor or by the city council. What I will do is I will comment on what I think are the differences, because we have had these discussions for years. Now, my own personal preference is for a part-time council as we have now. I don't buy the assumption in the question that only people who have the income can afford to do this. I have seen members of the council who are state employees, people who work for insurance companies. There have been a variety of people who have served on the city council over the years with different experiences. But if we are going to have this discussion, it must be one from a citizens' commission, and we must examine not Portland or Seattle, not New York or Los Angeles, not Verona or Mount Horeb, but we have to look at cities roughly in our size, our type of economy, like Lincoln, Nebraska. Maybe in a far stretch, we can take in Des Moines. But we have to look at our comparable cities, have a citizens commission, and go about the discussion that way. It cannot be driven by the city council or the mayor.
Yeah, the mayor and I are going to agree on this. And he's right. When it comes back to what the city council looks like and what the city council is composed of, it should be up to the residents. We are your citizens. We are your we represent you in government. Now, what is happening and what you're seeing is the stresses of many city council members who are getting overwhelmed by what it means right now to serve the city of Madison. We are a growing city. We have many more needs. So as you have city council members who are now regularly going and writing letters to the editor to state that we need more resources, hopefully our residents are able to listen to that message. I'm encouraged that we're seeing more diversity now in our city council as more individuals of color are running. You could see in the Capitol Hue's primary colors, no matter what, you're going to get a mayor who's white and is a male. That we can't change. But I do see that there's more public participation, and I'm excited by it.
Any rebuttal, Mayor?
There's just one more thing that I wanted to add. We also ought to look at, and this is not meant as a criticism of any member of the council, but we also ought to look at the size of the council without necessarily saying that if we reduce it, we have to go full-time. Madison, Wisconsin, with 20 members of the city council and less than 250,000 population, has got one of the largest bodies of comparable cities in the United States. And maybe this is an example of where less is more.
Anything else? Great. One more question from the audience here, and again, we got some excellent questions from the audience. I think there's no question that of all the mayoral primaries this year, sharpest audience so far tonight, by far the best looking. This is an interesting question. I really like it, and we're going to I guess we're going to start with Alder Resnick this time. Politics in this race aside, do you respect your opponent? And what do you admire most about that person? We'll call this the Mary Burke question.
We're starting with this one. The mayor's been a mentor to me. I have learned a whole lot from Mayor Paul Soglin. He was the man of the century, last century. But I say that with a lot of respect. There's a number of projects that happened in the city of Madison that would not have been accomplished if anyone else was in office. This is, for me, an election about the future, but not one of disrespect for Paul Soglin.
I'm still reeling under this mentor business, because when I look at the record in terms of our agreement on major issues, I find that Mark Clear, who's been the principal council leader in opposition to most of what I've tried to push, is the one who's captured Alderman Resnick's fancy more than me, but so be it. I wasn't asked who my mentor is. We judge people by what they value and what they think is important to them. And oftentimes people will say things that sound good, but they don't practice them. But Alderman Resnick's made two decisions that I think are very important, and one which gathered my respect. The first one actually is not as important as the second one. The first one was that despite the fact that he could have left the campus area after he graduated, he chose to continue living downtown. And the second one, which I think is more important, was the decision that he made as a business person to locate their company in the downtown area, when so many similar type companies are not only located on the periphery of our community, but outside the boundaries of the city of Madison. And I think that's a real value-based decision that I admire.
Thank you. I'm just going to leave the redirects alone on that. We ended on a great note there. We now have our question that Alder Resnick submitted for Mayor Soglin. Mayor Soglin, the last point-in-time homeless count from January this year counted 808 homeless people in Madison. This is a 41% increase from the count in January of 2011. Given this information, how do you feel about proposing $25,000 to ship homeless people out of Madison as you did in 2012?
First of all, I think we ought to recognize the nature of the homeless problem in Madison. And I want to share with you my reaction when I get a letter from someone in Mount Horeb saying to me that we, the city of Madison, need to do more about our homeless. Everyone's homeless, especially demonstrated by the fact that we've got police departments from here in Dane County that are picking up their residents and driving them to just a block from where we are today and leaving them off. The fact that we've got a criminal justice system, that we've got a mental health system that discharges individuals oftentimes where it is most convenient, which is Madison, Wisconsin. And that is unacceptable. And that is a significant part of the growing homeless problem. Now, I can't remember the 2011 figures, but I do know for the last 2 years, the homeless count has been relatively flat. But let's go back to that $25,000 budget item in 2013. And let's ask all the journalists and all the political commentators and all the candidates for mayor who miscast, misdescribed, misspoke, said everything but they didn't tell the truth about that proposal. They likened it to something called Greyhound therapy, which is you simply round up homeless and give them tickets and get them out of town. But the program was only to provide bus tickets to those who wanted to be returned to their other communities where they came from. Steve Schooler, the operations director for Porch Lake, said his organization does provide tickets to the homeless who request them. It wasn't a new idea, it wasn't a novel idea, it wasn't a cruel idea. It was an idea based on this. If someone wanted to return home, wanted to be with family and friends, and could demonstrate that there were people prepared to accept and receive them with services, that we should have tickets available. The day after the proposal was turned down by the Board of Estimates, a homeless couple came up to my office asking where were the tickets. But I think the real issue here is not my proposal, a sound one endorsed by social workers and people who work with the homeless. The real question is, why do folks find it necessary to miscast, misdescribe, mischaracterize a proposal? Why do we need to take cheap shots in this debate? Why do we have to do such things if we're really committed to solving the homeless problem? I am committed to doing that, and I've made it clear that I am committed to do what is seen scientifically and proven in Salt Lake City and in Phoenix as the right way of doing it. You create permanent housing, then deal with the other problems.
Okay, we will move into closing remarks at this point. Each candidate has 4 minutes. We'll start with you, Alder Resnick.
I'm going to be very brief in my closing, which is simply this. Where is the city of Madison going in the next 4 years? Are we taking advantage of all of those opportunities that make us a great place? We talk about where we're making our major investments. In our economy, in our transportation system, in our budgeting, in our infrastructure. And it's making sure that we are holding ourselves up to that highest level. That we can write back and say, we've done these amazing things on energy efficiency, that we've done amazing things on transportation for the rest of the country to model, that we've done amazing things on making sure that we have an equitable workforce that includes, empowers, and innovates. We can do that in the city of Madison. But what it's going to take is new ideas. It's going to take a community that's willing to work together, a compassionate community, and look at how the city of Madison can be the greatest place for everyone, not only to reside, to live, to work, and to enjoy our community. I thank you all so much for coming out to Central Library tonight in this beautiful facility, and I would encourage you to vote on April 7th.
The responsibility of being mayor is actually a very joyful one, as difficult as it may be. The vision of this city is to create for ourselves, for our family and friends, an inclusive place for all of us to live, to work, to play, and to learn together. It's a real challenge to deal with a budget situation as I inherited, the mounting debt, to face the challenges of homelessness, of disparity, the worst vacancy rate for housing in the country, and to go about working with the private sector, working with the city council, working with you on all of these challenges in a consistent and fair manner. We have made great progress in 4 years. But I want to share with you something that was said to me after the last budget was adopted. One member of the city council came up to me and said, "It's a great budget. Mr. Mayor, you got everything you wanted. We, the city council, got everything we wanted." And I said, that's the problem. You can't do it all. You have to make tough choices. They have to be fair. I've tried to serve you that way. I will continue to serve you that way. And when I look at my responsibility, it's not an insider's game. Now, there are people with influence. There are people who are referred to as the movers and shakers, the people who can build $60 and $80 million buildings, the people who can write out checks for $1 million to nonprofits. They're important. But so are the people who go to work every day, don't show up at every neighborhood meeting, don't write in a comment on every post in Isthmus online or the Cap Times, well, Cap Times doesn't have them anymore, the State Journal online. It's recognizing the importance of the folks who do the day-to-day lifting around here. I am committed to serve everyone fairly, hopefully intelligently, hopefully with a certain degree of grace, and recognize that I don't have all the answers. A reporter came up to me at one point in the 1990s and said, "Mayor, you get everything you want," pointing to Monona Terrace and a whole group of other projects. And I said, no, I didn't want them. Those were other people's ideas. It wasn't my idea to solve the convention center challenge by dusting off the Monona Terrace plans. It was other people's. My job is to make it happen fairly and equitably, and with your help, I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, everybody. Once again, follow the mayor's race on yourcaptimes.com. We'll have a lot more for you between now and April 7th, when we'll all vote. Thank you. Oh, sure.